Hi, good evening. So tonight we've seen a lot of very cool prototypes, and my topic is quite broad. It's really how to go from a prototype to a product. And I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I'm not going to give you any answer to that. I'm just going to share my experience, because to give you a complete answer, it would just take days and days. Every product, every prototype is quite specific. But what I hope is that via my experience, I can at least entertain you and maybe give you some nice tips. We'll see. I hope so. So, first question is, has prototyping become easy peasy? I would say yes, it has, but maybe the guys who presented their prototypes wouldn't be very happy about that answer. But if you compare, and if you come back a few years ago, compared to those old days, yes, it has, because now you can find some nice and easy Raspberry Pi, Beagle board, so electronics is cheap, and you can buy it from any place. You just go to your computer on any website, and you have it. Next day, it's in your letterbox. So there you go. You have the electronics. What about the software? Even here, we keep hearing about open source, and open source is fantastic. You have Linux. If you want to do some image processing, you have OpenCV, you have Qt, and you name it. I mean, the list could be well longer. And if you need some help, you've got some groups to which you can ask questions, like Stack Overflow. Stack Overflow is a great friend when you do some prototyping. So there you go, software is in your box. And what about the box itself? Even for the box, if you want to model it, know what it's going to look like, then you've got some 3D modeling tools. You have Blender, you have SketchUp, and again, the list would be too long to be complete. And if you want to build the box, you've got the Fab Lab, or if you want even to do it yourself, you can buy some cheap machinery tool, because now you find some on eBay. You can have a 3D printer. So yes, it's easy. But how fancy can it be? I took some examples, but I don't even have to list them because you've seen them tonight. You can do almost anything. So I just picked some on the internet. I mean, you could find thousands of those. So like you could add a fingerprint scanner to your garage door opener. If you do that, you'd better be careful to test your software before you want to enter your garage, because if it doesn't open, might have some issue. But yes, you have some open source to do that. I found this one funny. On an Arduino, you can build an auto-trigger spray gun to keep your cat off the furniture. Can be helpful, right? And this one also I liked. You can mute any phrase you want on your TV. And I really wanted to build this one before the World Cup, the Football World Cup, but I'm not sure. It might have led to a divorce, because I did have some ideas of what to mute, but anyways. So let's make a product now. You have the prototype. OK, what do we need to do? You've heard the questions from the jury. Do you think that people will be interested in your product? That's the first question you have to ask yourself. But that's not the topic of tonight. I hope that once you want to make a product, you have answered that question yourself. So let's say it's a yes. Then another question you can ask is, does my product have to be beautiful? Or I just don't care, like for my spray gun, does it have to be made out of some precious material? Does it have to have a nice color? Or I don't care, I just care about the functionality. Once you start selling a product, this question is more important than we think. And what about the legal aspect? What if your spray gun hurts a cat? Are you responsible for it? There again, those are things that we don't worry about when we build a prototype. And it goes way beyond that. If you have some electronics, you have also all those aspects about electromagnetic compatibility. Yes, there are some rules we need to follow. Are they the same in France? Are they the same in the US? So you might have a product in France. Do you want to sell it abroad? What about the rules over there? And how reliable does it have to be? Do you have to offer a warranty? Once you sell it, if it doesn't work after a year, are you responsible for it? Do you have to offer spare parts or not? You know, all those questions, they might sound obvious, but once you start digging into them, it takes time, and you really have to keep them at the back of your mind if you want to make a product out of your prototype. So, and then how to deploy it, how to maintain it, and there again, the list would be very, very long. So what I'm going to do tonight is take this one as an example, because that's the one I know best. I come from a company called Infuser, and we build a small robot. It's that big, it's 12 centimeters, and it has a tactile finger. So with its tactile finger, it can demonstrate IoT devices. Ah, it's gone, come back. There you are. So like here, it demonstrates a connected watch. It can also demonstrate features from a phone or applications on the phone. So it's, for this conference, it's kind of funny because the robot is an IoT device demonstrating IoT devices. So we know about some difficulties for going from a prototype to a product. So let's start with what I call the outer shell. I'm very sorry about the English, but when I saw it was in English, I thought, oh my goodness, there are so many words I don't know in English about that precise topic. So I hope you get the idea. So first, this one, that's not mine, the very first one. It's Domiti. She's the one who first founded the company. And at home, she built that small prototype. And she saw that it was functional, but if you look at it, I know she wouldn't mind if I say it's really ugly, because she knows. And it kind of was, but what's funny is that this first version was not even called a robot, it was called a robotized arm, because it was really moving like that. And the shape also was more like a robot you would find in an industry, not like a humanoid. So on the second version, I joined Domiti at this stage. We completely reworked the design. And our engineers, they were fantastic. They come from electronics, and we asked them to do some cardboard. You see at the back, it's some cardboard. We did everything, right? We glued some plexi. That's the fun about startups and building a prototype and going to a product. And we fully reworked the robot, and we thought, oh, this is it. We have a product. Look at it. It's kind of cute. It has a nice eye, and it was moving smoothly. We made it move like your arm, like your wrist. And then we thought, maybe we should ask a designer what he thinks about it. And actually, now we do have a product. Just before we didn't, even though we thought we did. Quite a difference. And there are statistics saying that in France, we don't pay attention to design, and we really should for most products. So just for the fun, I put the proposals we had from our designer. So on the left-hand side, we had one. You can't see the robot because we said, oh, we would like one model in which the robot plays like peekaboo. You push on the button, and there it comes out of the box. Middle one is the one we eventually selected, and then the last one. So I don't know which one you would have picked. The way we chose is we asked friends, we asked families, we asked people working with us in the corridor. So it wasn't a personal choice. It was really made out of some poll. So challenges about this box. So the challenge is to find the right designer, the one who really understands your values. And I think we were lucky to find a designer who was not just good at drawing the way the robot would look like. He went a bit further, and he made a functional robot for us. So he knew exactly how to build that box to insert a lock, because we had this issue, right? If you want to demonstrate a phone, our product goes in retail, for instance, you have to be sure that no one breaks it to steal the phone. We had all those challenges about inserting the motors inside the robot, inserting the lights. And if you have a design which doesn't include those requirements, then you're going to have a big step going to the next phase. So our designer was good in that sense. So if you ever want to use a designer, think about this and ask him how far he goes into the design. And yet, even though that person was really good, we still had to review a lot of his initial choices. We had to review the material, was it the right price? We had to make some redesign for changing parts, for instance, and also to build the robot faster. Once we started building it, it was taking too much time. So there comes the fun. So luckily, I'm a do-it-yourself person. I do a lot of things at home. So I enjoyed myself trying to build that small platform out of wood. Then I called some company to help make it out of metal. Then it was really just way too heavy. And then we came back to plastic, but did it have to be painted? And the list is very, very long. So even once you have this beautiful picture, you don't have your product yet. And then in terms of technology, so even though you have the choice of material, you have to know how you're gonna build it. So do you 3D print it, or do you, and then you have a lot of vocabulary. I Googled it to know it in English, but I'm so much more familiar in French. I even left some French words which I couldn't find with Google Translate. But there is one which is interesting, it's molding. So once you mold your product, what's nice is that then every single piece is very cheap. If you do 3D printing, it's not that cheap. If you start molding it, it becomes cheaper. But you have at least, people who know that better than me would laugh, but you have at least two ways of molding. One is, and think about your kitchen, right? You have those soft molds in which you make your cakes, and you have the very hard ones. Right? And if it's soft, the problem is the mold itself is not very pricey, but you throw it away after 20, 30 pieces. If it's hard, then you can make just thousands of pieces. But the mold is very expensive. So that's where you start thinking, okay, I have my Excel, what does it cost, how many pieces am I gonna make? And mostly, am I sure about my design? Because if you want to change it once you have invested in that mold, then it's just too late. Sorry. So we haven't even been through that phase yet, although my next slide might let you think that, that I know about it. And I've put it because I wanted to show off a bit, right? I spent so much time trying to understand what people were telling me that I wanted to put a bit of it in the slide. So once it comes to molding, people ask you, okay, but your product, does it have dépouille or contre-dépouille? No English term for that, sorry. And I was like, okay, let me check. And you go to internet, and I call my brother, and I try to understand. And actually, it sounded very easy, because, again, you think about kitchen and cooking, and on the left-hand side, you see that if you have your rigid mold and you put your cake would be the blue thing, then you can just take it off without breaking it. If you go to the other picture, you will have to break your mold or your cake to eat it, right? So that's the notion of, is it moldable or not? And if you like flambés, like I do, I'm a huge fan, I have a question for you. Moldable or not? Yes, you see, that's easy, right? Yes, it is. So now let's say that you put your flambé in that bottle. Moldable or not? It's not, with that shape here, and that's why I put a straw in there, right? So, I can do it. So then I went a bit further, and I checked, there is a nice website about molding a pedal. Easy. And then I started reading, and it was like, le plastique injecté suit le chemin le moins contraignant lorsqu'il en a un, donc la matière. All right. We need a specialist. And it's going to be my conclusion on all the topics. At some stage, when you go to a product, you need some expertise. Electronics. So I already gave you the answer. The conclusion is at some stage you'll need some expertise, but here is ours. So the first box we built, it was awful inside, really awful. So many wires, and we could hardly move it because it would break. But it was functional. That was the first prototype. You have, so let's say Raspberry Pi, and you have some breadboard, and you can do really anything. But it's not a product for many obvious reasons. So next phase, you can do something a bit more fancy. Now you have ways to build your own small board, but for those you know, it's still not a product. At some stage, you need to invest, and you need to have really a dedicated, fully dedicated board. And it's true of many things. It's true of power, for instance. The power management is a big, big issue in terms of electronics, and you need to have a serious thought about how to build your electronics. What have I put in there? I'm not going to go deep into that one. The person who was presenting previously did show that graph where if you want to transmit data with your device, which is the case once you have IoT devices, you really need to think about your technology, radio technology. And there again, there are so many questions. What about the range? What about the data rate? What about the power consumption? But even more than that, if you want to sell abroad, is LoRa deployed in the US? Or am I going to have to support two different standards? And for us, luckily, we use the phone to transmit data. But even with the phone, we have some questions. If we use the Wi-Fi, then okay, no question asked. We just use the Wi-Fi, it's free. But not all our customers do give us access to Wi-Fi. So in that case, we have to think about adding a 4G card, a SIM card. But what about the subscription cost? And what do you do? How do you include it in the price of your product? How do you pay every year? Or do you just offer the first year and then you tell your customer, go and manage your own subscription after some time, after a year? Those are tough questions, really. Reliability. That's, okay, I'm going to keep saying it's hard, it's a lot of challenges and it's tough, but reliability, it did hit us big time. And I think the main advice I could give to anyone is be agile. Just start with a product and just be ready to rework it once you hit an issue. So we did have a few which I name here, and I can name them because we've solved them. Otherwise, you can guess that I wouldn't say anything. But now we do have a reliable product. So initially, we thought that our motors would last very long, for very long. And we started having test benches. But when you need money, you cannot wait for a year to see if your motors will last a year before selling a product. So we started selling, and then we had issues. So luckily, we had started those tests, so we were ready with a new winner in terms of motors. And we were also ready to change the design of the robot to include those new motors. And luckily, we had not gone through the phase of molding and spending a lot of money for nothing. There is another issue we faced, for instance, when we went to a show. They had a broken AC. It was so hot in there, really so hot. And suddenly, the board rebooted. So there again, we were lucky to have enough expertise to know which bit to change on our electronics. But the thing is, you cannot test every kind of environment. So you're going to start selling a product even though it's not 100% reliable. So you just have to know how much reliability you really want to hit before selling it and be ready to change it if needed. Cost. Again, cost, and cost. So when I was talking about the mold, it was because of cost issues. In hardware, it's the same. At some stage, you want to reduce the cost. And there again, you need some expertise. You need someone who really knows things about components and help you make the right choice to reduce the number of components or buy cheaper one, but which are equivalent. And software. So reliability again, when we started, or when everyone starts making a prototype, if you have to switch off the button, right, once every 10 times, that's okay. It fails, no worry, on, off, it starts again. Look, it works. On a product, of course, you can't do that. So that's, since I wanted to follow the same kind of curve for all my topics, that's the one I would use for software. You start, you have to hit the on-off button 1 time out of 10. You start having a product, it's 1 time out of 100. And then one day you want to hit nirvana. But that's actually very far away. Okay, so those are the challenges. And our robot gives us alerts if something goes wrong. And the first one that you might have seen it in the airport. It was in the airport at Nice for a few months, actually. First week, everything went well. No alerts, nothing. So we were very happy. And then I forgot checking about the alert. And on a Sunday, a friend of mine called me and he said, you know what? Your robot doesn't seem to work. And you're like, oh! Kidding. Okay, so I did ask him to switch off the button. I said, okay, just check that there is no one in the airport, no security around, and please, can you just up? And there you go, it started again. What we had is we had not properly tested. I don't know, for those who know, there is a concept of hardware watchdog, which is a mechanism by which the board would restart if something goes wrong. And at some stage, you don't keep working on your software so that, or your electronics so that it never fails. But if it fails, you have some backdoors so that it works again. So don't try to reach 20 out of 20 with your product. You will always have an issue, but at least try to have backdoors. And hardware watchdogs are there for that. So now we have those in place. Lesson learned. And also what's funny is that Stack Overflow, that group I was mentioning on which you can ask questions, when you have the prototype, you can always find an answer to your question. It's amazing. It can be a very special question. There is always an answer. And as you start moving along your product and you have more specific questions, there is always someone else in the world who at some stage did have the same question, but you don't have the answers anymore. They are gone. And that's really amazing. Once you start having those very specific issues, you're on your own. So there again, you need some expertise. I can see someone who's a big fan of Beetroot in the room, so I think he won't disagree with me. Even though you use some open source like Linux, you need to at least be able to fully manage what you put in there in terms of code. And I could go, okay, I have only 30 minutes. How do you read that timer? It's too technical to me. I don't even know how to read it. What does it say?
Yeah, you have 7 minutes left.
Oof! Plenty enough. 7 minutes, 7 slides. Perfect. So I won't, again, I told you, I won't give you the answers to all the questions, but of course, and it sounds obvious, very quickly you have to, and even from the very beginning, from your prototype, you have to put in place some software configuration management. You have to do that at a very, very early stage. And once you start growing your team, you're going to have people dedicated to releases, to specific customers, to countries. But initially, you have to do it all. So that was the meaning of my picture. You have to manage all the tools, which is funny, but can be also tiring sometimes. And another side, which I won't dig into too much, of these connected devices, is the web server. So your device talks to something somewhere, and that too does have to become a product. That too does have to be reliable. If your customer wants to check the data on your web server and the server is down, that's an issue. I put that picture. It sounds a bit out of context, but I really wanted to put it because it was funny. That was okay. I wouldn't say a product. It still was a prototype, luckily. But we had put a prototype in Monaco at the Rolex Masters. And the lady calls us and she says, oh, we have an issue. Your small video screen, it's down. So it fell inside the box. I was like, oh, okay. What can you do remotely about that? Nothing. So that's why when you test your prototypes, you start in the local area, right? Because in that case, I just drove to Monaco, and it was my first time to Monaco. I would have liked a different context, but anyways. So we went there with an engineer, and we had the tape, and we opened. So that's the cardboard here. We did cut it, and we put a lot of tape behind the screen so that it would fit in place and last for another few days. And sometimes you have some nice compensation, because in that case, once we went out, since it was the Rolex Masters, we could see Tsonga. It was the very end of the game, and he had just won the game. So, anyways, but that's okay for a prototype, for a product. You just don't do that. You don't drive to your customer who is miles away, right? Deployment, transportation. Our first air transportation, that's the mess we had in the office. How do we build that box so that the product doesn't break? Because now you have your NAS product, you want to send it over, and once you receive it on the other side of the pond, you want it to be in good shape. And what I found funny is that those guys here, they're fantastic. They're not in the room, so I say it really truly. They're great engineers. We are lucky to have them. But of course, they didn't read the user manual to build the box. It took them quite some time. And that should be a lesson for everyone. Your customers won't read that manual. And I tell it from experience, so really make it simple for them to use. Because sometimes, we say, if they don't do that, okay, it was written in the manual. That's not my fault. But eventually it is. It comes back to you. So once you have your product, you also have to think about productizing your packaging. How do you send it to your customer? And one day, there you go. You have your first customer. So that's the first feeling. Hey. And that's really the second feeling, truly. You're behind the screen, behind your server, your maintenance server, and you're like, does it send an alert? Is it connected to the network? Does it work? Oh, please, yes, it has to work. So to conclude, I told you about this product, which is kind of special. It does have some hardware, not all products do, but I think that many challenges we faced do apply to a lot of IoT devices. And yet, I hope it's not discouraging, because it's really fun. So have fun and make a prototype. Don't wait for the perfect product, even though you have to keep all those challenges in mind. Really, don't try to hit the best at start. But it's very easy to underestimate. And even once we know how difficult it is, we underestimate the efforts it takes to go from a prototype to a product. So this is it.
About security implication over the air.
That's, I said on that slide...
repeat the question, because otherwise they won't... Can you repeat the question so that
okay, yeah, sorry. The question is, what about security, about over the air, especially once you want, indeed, to make updates, but not just updates, once you start sending data to the server. And that's the slide I went through very quickly. There are many ways to add security, and known ways, but it's something you have to be aware of, and you have to plan for, and you usually don't do it for your prototype. So we thought about security. I'm not going to give you all our tricks, and not just about over the air. We had issues even when we went to shows like CES. It's easy to steal things and then just open the box and get what's in there. So opening the box and then being able to reproduce our electronic card is easy, but we try to really secure the software. So it's not just once we start transmitting data, it's even inside your object. You want to think always about security. I'm not sure it's a great answer, but yes, it's an important thing to think about.
No more questions, or maybe you're shy, or you want to keep it secret and ask it directly at the buffet?
They just don't want to work on.
Yeah, and don't wait because Lidvin has to leave afterwards. She won't be at the, you will not be at the buffet with us. Is that it?
It depends. I have a work issue.
So it means no.
So if I can solve it on the phone, I'll stay afterwards. But otherwise, I thought I had put my email address. I haven't. But,
okay, but just in case, now is your last chance to ask questions if Lidvin has to leave. Otherwise, maybe she will still be here. But okay, seems like everyone's satisfied. Ah, you have a question.
What are the next steps now that you've got a product? Now that you've got a product and customers, what are the next steps?
The next step is big series. So in our case, what's a bit special compared to some other devices is that we are B2B. For those who don't know, it's business to business instead of business to customers. So it means that in terms of volumes, we have much smaller volumes than when you do B2C, business to customers. So we started with few customers, which means even smaller volumes. And hitting the next phase of bigger series is yet again going, it's a bit like going from a prototype to a product again. So like I was saying, we haven't done the injection molding. For big series, we would have to. And that means a new, probably even a new design of the robot so that it fits that new technology. So yeah, I think we can take the same slides and repeat them for our next phase. But again, it's because we're B2C and we started from prototype to small volume, and now we hit higher volumes.
So now we have questions. Okay, so go ahead.
I couldn't answer.
So the question is, what is the cost of doing such a complex system? Is that it?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I couldn't answer in terms of cost in many years, but what is true is that we had made estimates of how much it would cost and how much we would sell it based on that thing which we thought would be a prototype, and it was plexiglass, cardboard, and plastic. It was cheap to make. Once we used the designer, the cost went up by, I would say, at least 10 times. But what's amazing is that, of course, the price of our product had to go up as well. But before that, we had no customer. After that, we had customers. So cost is an issue, but you have to know where to. If you have to spend money, you really have to think about where you spend money. So even though it's a complex product and we spent a lot of money and it's much more costly than we initially thought it would be, it was still worth it. I hope it answers the question.
Of course it does. And time is up. Thanks a lot. A round of applause for Lidvin.